So, welcome. We're going to talk about SXA. Adam Najmanowicz. My name is Mark van Aalst, and we've been working with SXA for quite some time now. Probably have been at Jason's session yesterday. Can we get like a show of hands who has attended his session yesterday? Like half of them. So I don't think we really need to introduce SXA anymore. SXA, it's a drag and drop toolkit. It's an accelerator to build Psycho websites. We have a simplified page architecture. It takes you from the whole wireframing process to the designing to the actual production site. Import HTML. You can export your site as HTML so that front-end developers can do their CSS styling, all their HTML modifications, and import it back into Psycho. Well, it depends on who you're asking. If you ask Lars, like he said yesterday, we have 200 components. I think it's more close to like 70 or so. Do that later on. Out of the box is mobile responsiveness. It supports multi-tenancy, and it's fully Helix compliant. It's the first module which we shipped that is fully Helix compliant. So let's talk a bit about the presentation architecture. It's a bit different than your usual Psycho platform implementations. This is the concepts of page designs. So page designs are just the way your page is looking. It can contain multiple partial designs. In their end, consist of components. The components you get with SXA, or you can build yourself. As you can see in a moment. We call them rendering variants, and these give you the ability to have different visual outputs of the same components. So the components will still be the same, all the logic in that component will still be the same, but it will look different. And that's where we want to focus on now. So before you are going to create any custom coding or do any custom features for SXA, we're going to have a look at the rendering variants and see how powerful they are and what you can really do with them. So a small example, let's say we have like a content item with a picture, in this case an apple, a title, some text, and some specifications in there. Using rendering variants, we can create these visual outputs of them. So they're all still the same content item. We're using the same component, but we're applying different rendering variants. Rendering variants are defined within a content editor. Later on in the demo, Adam will show you how you can create them, where they are being hidden. Just we want to walk through them to the basic definitions of it. So we have the rendering definition. This is typically the whole wrapper for your rendering variant. Then we have variant fields. Variant fields basically just read the field values from your item. Could be either from your context item or an item which is being referenced within your context item. Then we have the variant section. This is just a way of creating HTML. Wrap your fields in a certain HTML element. It could be like a basic element, like a span or a div. But we also allow more contextual elements like articles, footers, asides, whatsoever. And on all these fields, you can also apply different CSS classes, so make the life for the front-end developers a bit easier. Creative Exchange also allows the front-end developers to apply their own CSS classes and import them back into Psycho. Developer, you don't have to specify all the CSS classes. The front-end developers themselves can also do it, and it will be imported back. And then there's the variant placeholder, which allows you to embed different type of components in your rendering variant. So you can create quite complex outputs of your component itself. Feature which has been shipped in 1.3, I think. Yes, yeah. That's it. In 1.3, you can apply personalization rules in your rendering variants. Personalization rules within a field on your rendering variant. So from itself, you can personalize components, you can switch them based on personalization rules. With SXA, it is possible to do it even within your component. So let's invite Adam to show off a bit how this works.
Okay. Is this thing on? Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Hey, man. I don't. Oh, thank you. That's awesome. Okay, so Rendering variants. Yeah. Okay. So Mark talked about rendering variants about a few fields. When you will start exploring it, you will find out that there is actually some more functionality in them, and show you what we've done, what you can do with rendering variants, and rendering variants make it possible for you to not just shape the content of the HTML of the component, but actually not implement additional components. They support logic, they support markup shaping, but they also have some cool functionality that we will try to demonstrate. So here we've got you've probably seen this site. It's a legal demo site. There's a Habitat version of the site. We've whipped up this in SXA in a couple of weeks as well, because we need this parity. And in this legal site, I've created a page, and as you can see, the legal team is super excited about the fact that they are featured on SUGCON. So I'm going to wrap up the finishing touches on this article. And to show you the power of rendering variants, I'm going to limit myself to a single component, and everything that I will show you is just going to be a page content component with the various variants.
Maybe it's also nice to let them know that we've built this site solely with SXA. There's none C# code editor whatsoever. So if you look at our existing demo site, the legal demo site, it's all these different Visual Studio projects. This has been created without any lines of C# coding. The only coding applied was CSS, and
everything was on the front end. Granted, one thing that we don't have is this gizmo for the experience extraction.
Yeah.
That's always going to be, that's an integration, right? An integration will always require that you provide some code. So I'm going to drop this page content, and by default, since we have this default rendering of page content, you can see that I'm rendering the content in here. Well, that's not what I want. What I was asked to do is to display an author in the sidebar, and make the author to be entered once and then picked from on an article. So I don't want people to every time pick the author for this page. It should be just from drop down. So what Experience Accelerator gives you, I mean, we want you to stay in it's an experience accelerator, so we want you to stay in the experience editor, right? So couple of buttons that probably, even if you're using Experience Accelerator, you might not have actually pressed because it's not kind of apparent. In the page metadata section, you've got a different view on the content item that you're editing. So we've got some SEO data, the social metadata, taxonomy, and then other is every field. Buttons. So when you define your data template for the page that you're editing are going to be there. So you don't have to flick between the the content editor and experience editor. So what I've done is I've created just a simple drop link field where I can pick my editors, and those editors are part of the Sitecore content tree, which is just a list of employees, right? And I've selected the Eduardo, and I've created a rendering variant for my author. So that's the guy that is picked in this field. Now, if I switch Eduardo, Brenda, and save my page, you will see that Brenda is picked up. So without setting the data source, because that information is part of the page metadata, right? The author is part of the metadata of the page. It doesn't belong with the rendering necessary. The component doesn't need that, but instead we want this to be sourced from the properties of the site. So how is that done? That is a field. We've got one of the items that Mark didn't show is the reference item, and that variant field allows me to go through a link and change my context and start looking at another page, basically. So what I'm doing is I'm changing context through the link, through the author field. Since it's a link, I can go through it and look at fields that are in there. So in my author, then I've got some HTML markup, and I'm rendering from the author, I'm rendering a picture, I'm rendering his name and his title. Right, and I've showed this to my boss, and he's not really impressed. So I was asked to make this nicer. Tried that. Okay, that's somewhat better. That's another HTML view on this component. It's got more information. It's got the row and stuff like this. It's nicely looking. How about one more? Since those are our managing partners in the SXA Legal, we need the information for them to be available. Okay, well, we're surfacing other fields. We're providing additional formatting in form of those icons, and we can do all kinds of crazy styling. And maybe just one more. So that you can see that that can look completely different depending on how you need to how you want to render your content. That's all page content, right? That can be promo, that can be any of the components that support rendering variants. At this point, in many cases, we're just having those components, like mostly for the business users, that they know that, okay, well, this is page content, this is title, this is promo. They kind of think in those terms, right? But those components functionally are very much equivalent. You can achieve this functionality in SXA with rendering variants. Now, in time, it turned out that actually we have more than just one editor. And since some people are co-authoring those articles, we've actually decided that we should be rendering not just one author, but all of them. So I needed to change the. Let me just open the properties. So I've decided to switch the type of my field from author to authors. Basically, well, I've created another field, but I could just switch the field type and start adding more of them. And in my authors, I've got three authors available for this page. So what I can do is I can say that instead of going through the author field, I want to go through the authors field. And we will automatically detect that, okay, this is multiple items that I need to render, and we will repeat this rendering as many times as you need. Now, that is all cool, but we talked about those rules, and Mark was saying that that you can personalize not just the outside, but the inside of the component. So to show this, I've got this case that, well, okay, external users, my management likes this view the best. But then for the users that are logged into our sites, they want to show this contact details with an office phone, so that they can be contacted, but they don't want to give direct access. For our VIP users, we want to give like direct access with mobile phone and with email, because they need the access to the people that are there. So for this, I've created a simple variant that is going to, let me just save that. That I've personalized by using rules. I did it in here. I just did a simple rule that does a switch on a URL parameter, but in general, all of the XDB power is available to those rules. We are running in context, so you can specialize. You can provide your own rules that are based on the user profile. So for the anonymous users, which is without this parameter, they are going to see this nice block view. Now, when I actually log in, we don't really care that much about aesthetics, but we care about the fact that people should be seeing the contact to the person, right? So we want this to be less squarey, but there is a phone, and there is basically the information about the person. Now, if I specify the specific value of this parameter, VIP users, those users will see both the office phone and their mobile phone and their email. Now, how that is done, through the use of the rules engine, where you can say, okay, well, if I'm not logged in, and in my case, I've just specified if the details parameter is not present. If it is present, go into the other mode, the elaborate mode, and then only if details contains all the additional parameters, right? I mean, this rule is just for me to demonstrate how easy it is to switch, but any rules available to you through XDB can be participating in this functionality. And then one thing that is, just to honor everyone who is here, that we are adding to 1.3.1, which should be released, I think today or early next week. We've added the ability for you to query items. So effectively, we practically allowed you to eliminate the navigation component by using the page content. I don't know why you would, but in general, it is possible. It is still page content, but what it's running a query on context-related items, and it's giving you the ability to render, like, I'm on this page, but I want to, start looking at the children and get the children from underneath me, right? So I've got my rendering variant, which provides some markup first for me to attach, and then I run a query. I want, give me all the employees underneath the page that I'm in, and let's say that doesn't look right. I just want 4. Let's save that. And I've just got 4. And just to be slightly more inspiring, I'm just going to switch to an employee carousel. And you can see yet another look and feel, and in this case, the list is rotating, right? So it's all about configuration plus your JavaScript and CSS being provided to, put things in motion, right?
The rules you just showed and the whole query lookup, that's also available if you do use SXA to do the JSON data modeling, right? So in theory,
Absolutely.
you could create quite advanced APIs by setting the request parameters and do personalization rules on top of that, or even do it on the behavior.
They all mix and match.
Yeah.
It's all about having the properly sized, like Hanselman says, the Lego blocks should. So yes, JSON variant, HTML variant. Yeah.
Cool. So custom development. So if those rendering variants really don't fit your use case or whatsoever, then it's obviously still possible to do custom development. Within SXA, we have different types of renderings you can create, components renderings. We have your basic simple rendering. It's just your typical cycle rendering. Apply the Helix principle since SXA is Helix compliant, and you can get quite far with it. We also have a thing called composite renderings, where composite renderings are basically components which consist multiple components. So for example, a tab component could consist of multiple components like the page content, navigation, text, whatsoever.
You can think of those as framework for components. We're not opinionated as to what is in your carousel. We're just giving you carousel, which is a container for slides. And then you put all kind of components which can support rendering variants, which can be, you can put another carousel into a carousel. Don't know why would you do it, but you can. And then it's all about not building the carousel that is a specific thing, right? You want exactly the HTML that you can style to provide the functionality, and then inside of it, just put page content with the proper variant. Problem solved.
Yeah. So the examples. We have the accordion, which is just a default component in SXA. Tabs. It looks like these things are composite renderings. Then we have a thing called meta renderings, which are things you can see, basically. So if you would like to implement things like the Open Graph protocol, you can do that. There's several placeholders in where you can place them. You could do it in the head. You could do it in the footer bottom placeholder. Just to give you the ability to implement your custom, HTML, basically.
Yeah. That's basically for things like, okay, we're never going to deliver every component for every integration, right? You've got different integration with Google Maps, with Google, Analytics, or there is another social network that you need to integrate, right? We've got Open Graph. I don't know if we've got LinkedIn, but it doesn't matter. You can do it really easily, right? It's just a component that you can whip out in 15 minutes and integrate with every layout.
Yeah, things like the Google Tag Manager or stuff like that. One thing to keep in mind where you're building components for SXA is to think in context of sites or tenants. To make that a bit more easier, we have implemented certain tokens. As you all quite know, that Cycor has tokens which will just replace the variables with the current pass of IDs or whatsoever. We've introduced a few tokens, things like site tenant, current template. Well, you can see them here. You can also add your own, obviously. It's all in the pipeline system. You can add your own pipeline, your own processor to get your components. But it's just to be aware that if you are doing custom development and you're going to search for things like data source locations, keep in mind that your paths will vary if you have multiple sites. Then we have this custom toolbox within SXA, and obviously it's also possible to add your own components to it. It's all located in the content tree underneath settings, and I will show you in a bit how you can do that. And you can also add stuff to the whole scaffolding, so the creation of sites, the creation of tenants. You can set restrictions on it. You can add the available renderings, do all kinds of cool stuff, execute your own PowerShell scripts whenever you're going to implement a new feature, or you have some custom scripts that need to be running. You can do that. Well, let's go do something.
Do something. Okay, so Visual Studio. Writing SXA component is not really that different from, it's not really different from writing a standard sidecar component. It is a standard sidecar component, and you can, out of the box, just introduce your components into SXA. We will not be bothered. You will not participate in Creative Exchange, like your component will not be able to It will be included in Creative Exchange import export, but we will not provide you with this grid and styling functionality, which SXA is good at. So really what we're asking you to do is converting the component to SXA component is 15-20 minutes job. That's if you're starting. So the only thing that we're counting on is this. I'm just showing you the simplest possible component. It's the SXA bits in here are the fact that it is wrapped by those two divs. The first div, what it gives you is the ability to participate in grid out of the box without anything done from your side. You will have your component will size with Bootstrap, with Foundation, with Grid 960. You didn't do anything, right? Just added this guy here, and you are also compatible with Creative Exchange. So when your component gets exported and then imported, we will style it for you.
Maybe it's also nice to mention that in 1.3 we've introduced the whole grid framework. So out of the box you have the Foundation, Bootstrap, and well, the 960-degree grid system, obviously. But by implementing a framework, we're also giving you the option to add your own stuff, add your own framework, or add your own grid, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, yeah, that's the thing that I was alluding to, but I kind of thought that, yeah, that should have been explained. Okay. So what else? I mean, it's the standard MVC, right? So we're providing a rendering model base for your component. That's basically so that we can fill it in with all the grid and Creative Exchange goodness before we set it out on a page. And then the controller is usually an easy thing that should really be just passing model from the repository to the get model, and all the fun, which is not much, is happening in this case in the repository, which should be your business logic. Right in here, all the business logic is limited to getting title and passing it to model, but then you fill the field-based properties. That's where the Creative Exchange and grid stuff happens. Inside core, for this rendering, you're just defining it like a standard sidecar rendering. The thing that we need you to do to actually support Creative Exchange and grid is your rendering variants should inherit from the rendering variants that we provide, so that we have a place to store this information. And I'm going to close this guy, and in layout, renderings, feature. Yeah, that's one mistake that I quite commonly see, that people are, since they are building something for Experience Accelerator, they are putting their stuff in Experience Accelerator. Don't. We will wipe your information when we install. SXA comes with its own upgrader and installer. You upgrade SXA through installing on top of existing SXA, and then we give you this nice wizard which will update all your content, right? We actually go into your site, look through what's changed. We know what's changed. That's why we kind of introduced this new methodology, and fix the sites, fix the things that we need fixed between versions, right? But then we need our own encapsulated place where we can, feel safe that our content is actually not changed. So when you're adding your own functionality with Helix in mind, you do create your own folder, and then inside of it, just create the structure like you want it. I've created this all in startup because I wanted this all in one folder. When I'm putting those components all in one folder, when I start then showing them on the page, they show in the by the folder names, right? So if you want to integrate with one of the page structure stuff, you name the parent structure, and we will push it together with the SXA components. So we give you the way to feel for your components to feel very native. Yeah, what I saw, it's for the sake of time, we ask you to inherit from the grid settings and iStyling, so that your component, the one that I've just wrote, has this, and out of the box the styling and layout, and we will provide you with the functionality for the grid, for the styling, right? And it will work with Creative Exchange, and it will and it will be consistent with everything else. And yeah, and that's basically it. I've got with those few things, so there's not much to change if you've got an existing component. Other than this, it's just a standard sidecar component. And actually, just to show you that we're a friendly host for external components, this is the old friend from the Sidecar vanilla site. It's going on the page, and that's a component that is plain Sidecar component without anything. So you can use your components. All you need to do is include such component in your website. Site settings, in sorry, not settings, presentation, available renderings. I can just create an available renderings. If I want them to be available in my site, add them here, they appear in Toolbox.
So maybe I can still show them how they can do that, and keeping in mind that they are going to create new sites later on. So make it a part of the whole scaffolding process?
Yeah. So what you want to do is, well, you can have SXA you can use SXA with a single site, but when it really shines is when you're rolling sites one after another, right? So if you have created a new if you have installed SXA and created a new site and tenant, you've seen this scaffolding dialog, and you've seen this myriad of features that we provide you out of the box. So what I've got here, I've got this draggable comparer feature. This is something that I've plugged in, and that's really quite easy to set up, to integrate with it. And how you're doing it is within the system and feature startup. You can, I mean, the best way, and the way I always do it, because the smarter people actually wrote this than me, it's basically taking just look at how we structure the features, what are we doing, and we've got tenant and site setup, and just copy it, which is what I did, right? I've created a startup, then I've created a site feature participant. I called it draggable comparer, and I've said that this feature should only be available if those actions are validable on the site. Basically, I depend on other features. This is kind of like feature calling to feature, not habitat. Well, it's scaffolding. We kind of need some dependencies here, and those are very soft dependencies. So it's we found that this is not much of a problem. Okay, so to set up my new component, I need to add this component to available renderings, right? So what I'm doing is I've created. I'm saying here, and this is the add item action on a feature. I'm saying under available renderings, so under here, in this location, I want this template, I want to create an item of a specific template or branch. So I want to create this feature startup draggable comparer. No, sorry, it's under branches, because I want to create an item with a specific setup in it. So that's actually where we use the branch. So create this branch under the available rendering items and call it draggable comparer. And that's it. Every new site will have this item of this type. And then create a data folder for me, right? So under data, I need a draggable comparer container for my reusable data. And then in draggable, then create the draggable comparer rendering variants. And then add metadata, which is another feature from another feature that I started writing, but I didn't have the time to finish. It's basically for the metadata component that we've created for the purpose of the demo. We are in the process of creating a lot of materials that we will share. We're going to talk about some of them next. Oh, no. Where is it?
Yeah, that one, the demo time one thing.
This one.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the most important things I think with using SXA in a production environment is getting the caching right and kind of understand how SXA influences the whole caching process. I think, yeah, you're the best guy to tell about it.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, the important bit is that do an experiment. Just turn caching on everything and measure the difference. It's like night and day. It is going to be like that every time and for every product and every infrastructure. I mean, HTML caching is this magic bullet, but you need to not get too excited and test. I mean, there is so much things that this get influenced by. Your personalization, that's something that kind of is exclusive with caching. If you want to be really dynamic, you can't really cache it well. If you want to go to a customer level, it can get tricky. You can still do it, but you need to apply some thinking. Be careful when you're caching splitters, right? Anything that you put in anything, if you cache the thing, the container, it's going to cache everything inside. It's awesome, but it's it can be tricky if you don't think about it. And also memory consumption, you're getting something for something, right? You can cache and then vary by everything, but then are you really caching? So the parameters is something that we wanted to quickly dive into, and that's your kind of dashboard when you're caching, right? This is the caching setting for every component. So to make it cacheable, you just check the cacheable. If you don't check any of the buttons below, it's just going to keep one value for everything, right? And that's cool unless you have some different things in mind. So data source based, this is very useful, but you might need to be careful when you're talking about components that have or do not have the data source. If you specify the data source explicitly on the data source, just have this one value, but then you are not going to be different between pages, right? So per data source, it's not going to be different between pages. Now, if your component is like navigation and it doesn't have data source specified, so it's got always the same data source, but on different pages, Sitecore will consider it a different data source. So on every page, it's going to keep a copy, right? So that's why I'm saying make a mental note of making sure that you're not getting either hit on memory or performance, right? And it's still fine, because in navigation, you actually want this to be cached per page, because your navigation will be highlighted, will have the things where you are highlighted for you, right? We're putting those classes in. If you're not making use of them, then maybe, you know, just keep one copy of it, right? Device, not going there. Login, that's 2 copies, right? That's the someone, if you're doing it on a JavaScript side, then you can copy, you can cache your greeting component. But if you're doing it on a server side and you're saying hello, Adam, then you need to vary by user. Params is quite useful. This allows you to distinguish between, since we've got a fairly small set of components, they are going to be duplicated quite a lot. So you need params to be you will want params to almost always be applied, because this is just saying, yes, this component in this placeholder. And yeah,
there you go. Next slide. Yeah. So one thing we wanted to mention is that there is, SXA is still quite a young product, of course, and there's not that much information available. There is some on the documentation of doc.psycho.net. It's there, search for it. It's not always easy to find. But we kind of wanted to have like a best practice example side thing. So that's where the SXA showcase comes in. It's kind of a documentation site on SXA, built on SXA. It's available on GitHub. You can download it yourself. It's worth checking out the material, the documentation what's in there, but also go and do a deep dive in the product itself. You can really learn from how certain presentation techniques are being applied, what do those running variants do exactly. It's kind of, yeah, well, as we mentioned, it's what Habitat is to Helix, that's kind of showcase is to SXA.
So we've got basically in showcase, you've got samples for pretty much everything that you want to do with your components. It's not finished. Bear with us. We're making as much available as possible. But you can see that, you know, even on things like navigation, we're already showing you like how flexible this stuff can be. We're showing you the way to how to configure search, how it works together with all the search components are actually interacting, right? How to set up you know, different components like navigation. And navigation can be on a root level. It can be in, you know, in a splat, not starting from the root page. Then mobile navigation in toggle. You know, all this kinds of stuff, like navigation as basically a way of exposing all the different yeah.
Yeah, so next week just download it and yourself. Personally, it really helped me get started quicker with SXA, to just learn from the techniques that are being applied over there. Also, another useful resource, Slack, Stack Exchange. I think Steven also mentioned it this morning in his opening presentation. Well, Adam and the whole product team is on Slack, so you can ask them questions. They'll also try to get your feedback on certain features they're building. They're also available on Stack Exchange. I think Alain is quite prominently available there.
Yeah.
And we just wanted to thank you all for attending, and find us on Twitter if you have any questions.
Yeah.